I used to be very certain about my sexual market value. I once thought I had already maxed everything. I am relatively good looking, my skin is clean, I'm not too short, and I dress very well. There is no reason that any woman should skip me. Until I realized that I was still a broken student who had no income and lived the lifestyle of the bottom line in society. You see, how we value ourselves is very different compared to how women value us. I once thought looks were everything. One fashion jacket or one fancy pickup line would solve my life problem. But it was not true. Men's value takes decades to improve, and that's why we shouldn't invest into sexual market before we're 30 years old. And this topic is going to be an extension of how the hypergamy work in today's society and how that is going to determine our decisions whether we need to invest into the sexual market in our early age. There's one time when I date a very ugly woman. Her sexual market value is very low. She has a very average physique and she's a very average, Chinese girl. Throughout the interaction, her hypergamy really shocked me. Her lifestyle was very nerdy and she does not have a healthy eating habit or a healthy lifestyle, and she spent all her time to watch the anime and also watch, a gay novel, something like that. And she was aiming at the top 1% of the men, She was aiming at the K-pop stars. She was aiming every single thing about her ideal partner is maxed with everything. That's her hypergamy. She wanted to get a man like that, and that's the hypergamy of the woman in the bottom line. And she was definitely not the only girl who has this idea. And that really reflects how crazy the hypergamy turns out. In the current situation, that really shocked me once. For the average guy like me, it's no longer attractive to the woman that surrounds me, if we think that in the rational way. And the best decision that we need to do right now is no longer, chasing the woman, cashing out our value to the sexual market. Because if we wanted to have a certain relationship, there's two ways. There's one way is to improve ourselves and really increase the value until you match the hypergamy of the woman. And the other value is to continuously simping, become the value provider to women, become a beta and enter a relationship. And that's the only two ways that we can get into a certain what we call relationship. And also, two types of the interaction between the women. But what really make women respect you is still your value. You have to be stronger than her in order to claim your male dominance and having the dominance into this relationship, and making her enter your frame. And this requires a ton of hard work and a lot of times to achieve. And men take decades to achieve his value, to be very professional at one region and to have a higher status. It's a very time-consuming thing. It's not like when you buy a fancy clothes or when you know one line or two lines, to tell a girl. That's not a thing. The real value comes from the hard work that you do every day. But once you reach that level, once you invest enough of the time and reach that amount of the money looking, the physique, the money and status, is going to turn around. Your frame is going to reverse. She's going to enter your frame. But once before that, you have to enjoy the loneliness. That's the man's route. But it's very hard to achieve in that level in your early age or before we are 30 years old. That's why when we want to cash out into the sexual market in a young age, it's like boating against the stream. It's very hard because the woman's hypergamy is pushing very strong in that direction, and you're just going against the currency. So in that case, I think you're going to pay more effort and get less result, according to your time consuming. But if you spend the time to yourself and actually follow the stream, follow the tendency, when you reach that level of the value, and then the rest of thing will happen automatically. And in that situation, you're going to pay less effort and have more result because you're following the current tendency in today's society. And especially the lower value you get, the harder the harder you will be when you're interacting with a woman. It's going to be much more easier when your value is high, when you have a higher status. For example, in the university, we all see how different the way that a woman looks when she talks to you and when she talks to the professor, because the professor had a higher value than you, and so you can observe by your eye how different that interaction looks like. She was very energetic, really trying to seek for validation from the professor, but she was very indifferent about you. She sometimes never look at you in the class, and if you don't talk to her, you will never know each other. That's the difference. That's the gap between how women treat the low value man with a high value man. And so in this situation, men, when we reach 30 years old, that was an average age that we're starting to actually provide for society. And that is going to increase our social status and also the income, because money is nothing but a byproduct of the value creation. When we're after 30 years old, the frame is going to reverse. And also at the time, the woman is going to seek for your validation, and that is going to be a different story. And also after you reach 30 years old, you're going to see a very different response from the woman when you're comparing to when you're trying to approach them, in your 20 years old, when you are, similar to me right now, a very poor and broken student. How we invest our time is very important. If we invest our time in the early age, cash out continuously, without investing for the long term, we're continuously cashing out, see how many women we can get when we're 20 years old, and not invest our time to improving our value. When we reach 30 years old, we're still going to stay the same because we're continuously cashing out. We're not spending time on improving ourselves. But if we retrieve our attention and actually invest for the long term, fully invest into ourselves for the long term, and when we reach the 30 years old, we're going to be very different comparing to the guy who's continuously spending his time chasing girls, wasting time. That is going to really show the gap. In this current situation, when the woman's hypergamy is that high, we have to climb to the same height as their hypergamy instead of chasing them when we're much lower than their hypergamy. So this is the harsh reality that we're facing right now. The ugliest woman is aiming at the top male. And that's the exact situation in today's sexual market. And I've heard many similar experiences from my friends, and also according to my own experiences, the entertainment industry like K-pop, Korean TV shows, all those entertainment industry specifically for women also give them the illusion that they have the possibility to approach the top one male. It's possible for them. Like K-pops, they do the event where they meet their fans. All those entertainment industry lives the woman's hypergamy in a much higher extent. So it's much more easier for them to reach their satisfaction to the alpha on the internet, on reading the novel, chasing the stars, on chasing the K-pop stars. When they look at reality, what actually surrounds them is the average man. Once they took the drug of the illusion of being able to approach this top male, they are no longer acceptant to the reality. And that's why, we're facing a much harsh situation at the current time. So I do highly recommend it. When we have the time, when we're young, when we're 20s, it's very important that we invest our time in the right way, because if we continuously cashing out our value into the sexual market when we're in a very low status, the efficiency is going to be very low. But if we fully invest in self-development and really improve our value until we're 30s, we will be much more likely to have a chance to reach women's hypergamy and actually reverse this frame. So we're going to be the buyer and woman is going to be the product. So it's very important to invest time in the early age, really focusing on yourself.